The Galactic Council had always been a place of power, a hall where countless alien species came together to decide the fate of planets and civilizations. For centuries, it had been dominated by the oldest and most advanced species, those who believed they understood the universe better than anyone else. And now humanity had been invited for the first time. The humans arrived quietly, their ships smaller and less flashy than the towering vessels of most council members. But the humans carried themselves with calm determination. Inside the council chamber, rows of delegates sat in raised platforms, their forms strange and varied, some with shimmering skin, some with dozens of eyes, others with shapes that seemed almost liquid. The humans looked around, studying every face but never showing fear or hesitation. When the session began, the room buzzed with whispered comments. Many of the older species snickered at the sight of humans. They had heard stories about Earth, its small wars, its chaotic politics, and its inconsistent technology. They thought of humans as impulsive, emotional, and unworthy of standing alongside them. As the human delegation prepared to speak, a few delegates even whispered jokes openly, their laughter floating over the chamber like smoke. The human representative stood up, holding nothing but a simple data tablet. There were no dramatic gestures, no attempts to dazzle anyone with technology. Their voice was steady but clear, carrying across the chamber. "We are here to speak not only for ourselves," the human said, "but for the countless voices of our world, and for those who cannot speak at all. We come with respect but also with truths that need to be heard." Some delegates rolled their eyes. One of the taller species, with skin like molten silver, let out a loud, sharp laugh. Another, with multiple limbs, tapped each finger against the armrest in a mocking rhythm. A few of the younger species in the council giggled. It was as if humanity's very presence amused them. "Look at them," one alien whispered to another, "trying to act wise. They barely survived their own planet." Despite the laughter, the humans did not falter. They continued speaking calmly, explaining the issues that had brought them here. They spoke of treaties broken by other species, of border disputes that endangered innocent lives, and of trade practices that harmed not just humans, but countless smaller civilizations. Every word was measured, deliberate, and honest. The humans did not raise their voices in anger. They did not beg for attention. They simply laid out the facts, knowing that truth was stronger than mockery. But the laughter did not stop. Some members of the council whispered among themselves, turning the humans' words into jokes, questioning their logic and dismissing their points before they were even finished. Others openly waved their hands, signaling boredom. Still, the human delegation stayed composed, their silence acting as a quiet contrast to the noise. In that moment, it became clear that the humans were not here to compete with grandeur or spectacle. They were here to be heard. Hours passed. The human delegation presented reports, charts, and records from Earth, showing evidence of the issues they highlighted. Many of the council members had never seen such attention to detail or such transparency. And yet the laughter and mocking continued. The older, more established species assumed the humans were naive, incapable of understanding the complexities of interstellar politics. Some even whispered that humans would learn their place soon enough, just like so many before them. And yet, even in the face of mockery, the humans remained calm. They did not demand respect. They did not retaliate with insults. Every motion, every word, every gesture was deliberate, showing a discipline and patience that few species could claim. A quiet tension began to fill the chamber. It was subtle at first, almost unnoticeable beneath the laughter, but those who paid close attention could see it. Some of the younger delegates began to glance nervously at their leaders, questioning whether mocking the humans was wise. The human representative concluded their opening statement without raising their voice or showing emotion. They simply said, "We hope that what we have presented today will be considered not with judgment but with fairness. Our world seeks cooperation, not conflict. Our goal is understanding, not dominance." And with that, they sat down. For a moment, there was silence. The council members were caught between laughter and unease. The humans had not reacted to mockery with anger. They had not pleaded. They had not tried to impress anyone with power or technology. Instead, they had presented themselves honestly and calmly. Some delegates shifted uncomfortably in their seats, realizing that perhaps they had underestimated this young species. And though no one in the chamber admitted it openly, The humans had already achieved something remarkable. They had planted a seed of doubt among the older, arrogant species. A quiet but powerful question. Maybe these humans were not as easy to dismiss as everyone believed. Outside the chamber, across the council's vast halls, whispers began to spread. Some delegates speculated that humanity might be different. Others laughed it off, insisting that any species that had survived only a few thousand years could not possibly compete with civilizations older by millions. But the human delegation remained in the chamber calm, observing and unshaken. They knew that change rarely came with applause. Sometimes it came quietly, in the form of patience, in the form of silence, and in the form of truth laid bare for those willing to see it. As the session drew to a close, the humans gathered their documents and prepared to leave the chamber. There was no fanfare, no dramatic gesture. They simply walked, each step measured and deliberate, leaving the echo of their presence behind. And, though the council did not yet realize it, this first day of their participation would mark a turning point. For the first time, a young species had faced the full weight of mockery and emerged not with anger or despair, but with dignity and resolve. The council members who had laughed most loudly were the last to leave, exchanging uneasy glances. Something about the humans unsettled them, though they could not yet name it. Perhaps it was their calm. Perhaps it was their honesty. Or perhaps it was the quiet confidence that came from knowing one's place in the universe and refusing to be defined by others. As the humans departed, the chamber seemed strangely emptier than before. The laughter had faded, replaced by a whisper of something else, a question that lingered in the air, waiting for an answer. Could it be that humanity, the species everyone had mocked, might one day show the universe a strength no one had expected? And with that thought, the humans walked out of the council chamber, carrying not only their own hopes but the silent power of restraint and patience, two weapons far stronger than mockery or ridicule. The next day, the Galactic Council reconvened. The chamber was larger than ever, stretching out like a vast cathedral of stars. Light refracted through transparent walls, revealing distant galaxies beyond, while strange symbols floated in the air, marking each delegate's seat. For most species, this was a place of ceremony, of protocol, of careful calculation. For the humans, it was a stage for the first real test of their patience. As the session began, it was immediately clear that the council had not forgotten the humans' presence from the previous day. Whispers spread quickly, some amused, some curious. Many delegates were still skeptical. Why would such a young species dare to speak openly, challenging the authority of civilizations that had lasted millions of years? The humans took their seats calmly. There were no fanfares, no attempts to impress. They had no flashy gadgets, no massive ships projected on hollow screens. All they carried was the knowledge of their world, their records, their words, and a quiet determination to be heard. When the human representative rose to speak, the mocking began almost immediately. One of the older species, a towering figure with iridescent wings, laughed so loudly that it echoed across the chamber. Another, with dozens of glowing eyes, whispered to its neighbor, "They speak as if they understand, but they are children of a tiny, chaotic planet." Even some of the smaller, younger species giggled, turning their hollow screens to capture the scene for amusement back home. The humans ignored the laughter. They did not flinch, did not shout back, and did not attempt to demand respect. Their voice was calm, steady, and precise. "We are not here to entertain," the human representative said. "We are here to present facts, to share experiences, and to seek solutions. Our words are not a challenge to your history, but a call for fairness." Some delegates rolled their eyes and waved dismissively. A few snorted, muttering under their breaths about human arrogance. But as the humans continued, their words began to strike deeper than anyone expected. They spoke of lives lost due to border conflicts, of entire communities suffering from unfair trade practices, and of younger civilizations crushed under the weight of larger, older powers. The council had heard complaints before, of course. Many species had protested treaties or restrictions at one time or another. But what set the humans apart was their combination of honesty and calm. They did not exaggerate. They did not threaten. They simply presented truth in its raw form, allowing it to speak for itself. For hours, the humans presented their findings. Charts, reports, and logs from Earth filled the chamber's hollow screens. They showed detailed analyses of incidents, evidence of unfair treatment and the consequences of neglect. Every fact was carefully documented. Every story was told with clarity and respect. And yet, despite this effort, the laughter continued. Delegates whispered among themselves, turning the humans' meticulous work into a source of mockery. "See how they cling to details," one said. "They think this matters. They think anyone cares about their little world." Another snorted, tapping its fingers in a mocking rhythm. Some of the oldest species even projected images of humans smiling, pairing them with insults as if to reduce their arguments to comedy. Even so, the humans did not falter. They continued their presentation with unwavering composure. Every step, every gesture, every word was deliberate. They did not argue back. They did not raise their voices. Their calm presence contrasted sharply with the growing arrogance and impatience of the other delegates. At one point, a particularly harsh voice interrupted. "You speak of fairness as if it is universal," said a delegate with skin like polished stone. "But fairness is for those who understand their place. You are young, reckless, and emotional. You cannot hope to influence the council." The human representative looked directly at the speaker, their eyes calm, voice steady. "Fairness is not an idea reserved for the powerful. It is a principle that guides those who wish to survive without causing unnecessary harm. We do not ask for your permission to speak, but we do ask that our words be heard." A hush fell over parts of the chamber. For the first time, some of the younger delegates stopped laughing. They looked at the humans and saw something unexpected. Not arrogance, not anger, not fear, but a quiet confidence rooted in truth. It was as if the humans were saying, "We will not fight with your mockery, but we will not be silenced either." Minutes turned into hours. The humans detailed their concerns, answered questions, and provided evidence. Each time a delegate tried to interrupt with mockery, the human representative calmly addressed the point and moved on. There was no frustration, only focus. No anger, only resolve. The laughter began to fade, replaced by subtle unease. Some delegates whispered nervously, realizing that the humans were not reacting the way anyone expected. "Why do they not respond with anger?" one asked. "Why do they not crumble under our ridicule?" Meanwhile, the human delegation remained composed. They knew that influence in the council did not come from shouting, from insults, or from trying to dominate. It came from clarity, patience, and persistence. By staying calm, they had begun to turn what seemed like a disadvantage, their youth, their lack of flashy technology, their small fleet, into a strength. By the end of the session, the humans had completed their presentation. They had not won applause. They had not changed every mind in the chamber. But they had done something far more important. They had made the council pause. They had made the powerful and arrogant question their assumptions. For the first time, many delegates realized that perhaps humans were not the simple, emotional species they had assumed. As the humans gathered their tablets and prepared to leave, a strange tension filled the chamber. The mocking voices were quieter now, replaced by whispers of curiosity and concern. Even those who had laughed the loudest could not ignore the impression the humans had made. The way they had handled ridicule, the way they had presented truth calmly, and the way they had refused to be drawn into conflict. It was unlike anything the council had seen before. Outside the chamber, across the grand halls, news of the humans' presentation spread. Some species dismissed it, calling it a fluke, a minor annoyance in the larger scheme of the galaxy. Others could not stop talking about it. How could a young, untested species withstand the full weight of mockery and still stand tall? How could they remain calm while hundreds of voices mocked them openly? The human delegation walked through the halls with quiet dignity. They did not boast. They did not react to whispers or stares. They simply moved forward, each step measured, each gesture composed. They knew that real influence was not won in a single day, in a single speech, or through instant recognition. It was earned slowly through patience, discipline, and the refusal to be defined by others. That day the humans had faced the full force of ridicule and emerged not defeated, but stronger. They had shown that intelligence and courage were not only measured by technology or fleet size, but by restraint, composure, and the ability to speak truth in the face of doubt. By the time the humans left the council chamber, the delegates were left to reflect. Some were annoyed, some confused, and some quietly impressed. The laughter that had filled the room at the start of the session had faded, replaced by a subtle, growing tension. It was a reminder that even a young species could command attention and respect without shouting, without threats, and without theatrics. The human delegation had not yet changed the council. They had not yet solved every problem, but they had done something just as powerful. They had planted a seed of doubt, a quiet recognition that the humans might not be as easy to dismiss as anyone had believed. And in the galaxy, where assumptions often ruled more than facts, that was the first step toward real change. And so, as the humans walked out in silence, they carried with them more than their own hopes. They carried a quiet reminder to the council. Strength does not always roar. Sometimes it walks quietly through a hall of mockery, letting truth and patience speak louder than any voice in the room. The council chamber was quieter than usual that morning. For the first time, the oldest and most powerful species seemed unsettled. The humans were still present, sitting calmly among the towering forms of the other delegates, yet they had changed something in the air. It was subtle, almost imperceptible, but the tension was there. The older species could not shake the feeling that something had shifted, though they could not name it. The humans had not spoken much since their last presentation. They had completed their reports, answered questions, and faced ridicule without ever raising their voices. Many delegates had expected them to leave in anger, to lash out in frustration, or to make dramatic threats. But instead, the humans had simply continued to observe quietly, patiently, their expressions calm and focused. The morning session began as usual, but the conversations were different. Delegates who had been openly mocking the humans before now spoke in hushed tones, casting occasional glances toward the human seats. Some whispered nervously to each other, questioning whether they had misjudged this species. Others were still stubbornly dismissive, certain that a young species could not possibly hold influence over the council. When the session officially started, a human representative stood, but this time there was no data tablet, no presentation, no charts. They simply looked around the chamber and spoke in a measured, calm voice. "We have presented our observations, our concerns, and the facts of our world," the human said. "We have shown you what is happening on Earth and near our borders. We have not asked for your approval. We have not sought your applause. Now we will do something different." The delegates shifted in their seats. A few laughed nervously, unsure what to expect, but the human did not raise their voice. They did not make dramatic gestures. They simply continued, "We will leave. We will leave this chamber, not in anger, not in defiance, but in quiet reflection. We will not argue with mockery. We will not chase validation. We will walk away, and we hope that one day our silence will speak louder than words." There was a stunned silence. Some delegates stared, mouths slightly open, unable to comprehend what was happening. Others leaned forward, curious. Was this a tactic, a bluff? Could a species simply leave the council and expect to be heard? The humans began to gather their belongings, moving with slow, deliberate steps. They folded their documents, stored their devices, and exchanged no words, no gestures, no warnings. Every motion was calm, precise, and purposeful. As they started toward the exit, the murmurs in the chamber grew louder, though tinged with uncertainty. Some of the older delegates who had mocked the humans most openly were visibly uncomfortable. They had never faced a species that would leave mid-session without confrontation or protest. Their arrogance had expected conflict, drama, or humiliation, but the humans had given them none of these. The silence itself carried a weight they had not anticipated. As the humans walked toward the exit, their steps echoed in the vast chamber. The sound was surprisingly loud in the sudden quiet, like a drumbeat marking the passage of something significant. Delegates tried to speak, to call them back, to demand explanations, but the humans did not turn. They did not look back. They simply walked. Outside the chamber, in the long halls of the council, other species paused. Some were unsure why the humans were leaving, while others felt the first hint of unease. There was a power in the humans' quiet action, something different from the usual demonstrations of strength or influence that the council was accustomed to. This was not a threat. This was not aggression. It was dignity, discipline, and resolve. And it was far more unsettling than any roar or show of force. Back inside the chamber, the remaining delegates tried to fill the silence with chatter, but their words felt hollow. The humor that had dominated previous sessions now seemed forced. Even those who had mocked the humans most heavily could not ignore the statement the humans had made through their quiet departure. For the first time, the council had witnessed that influence and strength were not always measured by power, weapons, or status. Sometimes they were measured by restraint, patience, and silence. The humans' departure became the talk of the council for hours. Some species dismissed it as foolishness, claiming that humans would learn their place soon enough, but others could not stop thinking about it. How could a species so young, so small, carry themselves with such calm authority? How could they walk away without fear or anger, yet make their absence feel like a challenge in itself? By the end of the day, it was clear that the humans had achieved something unusual. They had not confronted the council with aggression, they had not demanded respect, and they had not shouted over the laughter. Yet their departure left a mark deeper than any words could. The chamber felt different, as if the presence of humans, and now their absence, had shifted the balance in subtle, unspoken ways. The silence of the humans began to ripple through the council. Delegates who had previously been dismissive found themselves reconsidering old assumptions. Perhaps humans were not reckless. Perhaps their emotions were not a weakness but a source of clarity and purpose. Perhaps the simplicity of their actions, their refusal to be dragged into mockery, their calm decision to walk away, was a form of power that the council had never encountered before. In the following hours, whispers spread like wildfire. Delegates debated whether the human silence was strategic or merely a sign of confidence. Some argued that leaving the chamber was a form of protest, a signal that humans would not tolerate ridicule. Others saw it as a challenge, a quiet warning that humanity's patience had limits. For the first time, many species realized that they had misjudged the humans, and the uncertainty was unnerving. Even in their absence, the humans' influence grew. Their quiet exit became a story repeated across council communications and trade networks. Young species who had previously laughed at humans began to speak in muted tones of admiration or cautious respect. Older species, whose authority depended on fear and control, began to question the assumptions they had long taken for granted. The human delegation had left, but the weight of their presence remained, echoing through every corner of the chamber. The human delegation did not leave the council entirely. They returned to their ships calm and composed, preparing for the next steps. There was no celebration, no triumph. They had not sought approval or validation. They had acted not out of pride, but out of principle. Their silence was deliberate, a statement in itself. Humanity would not be defined by mockery, nor swayed by disrespect. And as they prepared to depart, the humans reflected on what they had achieved. It was not the changing of minds, the winning of allies, or the gaining of power. It was something more subtle, more profound. They had demonstrated that true strength often comes not from force but from restraint, not from shouting but from calm resolve, not from anger but from dignity. In the days that followed, council meetings were marked by an unusual tension. Delegates could not stop thinking about what the humans had done. Some tried to rationalize it, dismissing the act as folly. Others began to worry that they had underestimated this young species, whose patience and composure hinted at a power they had yet to reveal. Even the most confident members of the council began to wonder, what did silence mean to humans, and how far could it extend if they chose to act? For humanity, the act of walking away was both a beginning and a signal. It was a statement that they would not be mocked, belittled, or dismissed. It was a quiet form of power, one that the council had not anticipated, and it was the first step in a path that would, in time, force the galaxy to reconsider everything it thought it knew about this young, resilient species. The humans had not shouted. They had not demanded respect. They had simply walked out in silence, and in doing so they left a message far louder than words could ever convey. It was a message the council could not ignore, no matter how hard they tried. And in that quiet exit, humanity had taken its first true step onto the galactic stage, a step that would echo for years to come. The days after humanity's silent departure from the council chamber were unlike anything the galaxy had seen before. The humans had not returned immediately, and their absence itself became a topic of speculation and unease. Delegates whispered behind closed doors, analyzing every detail, every possible motive. Some laughed nervously, insisting the humans would return once they realized they had no real power. Others frowned, unsure what the silence might mean. Across the galaxy, news of the human exit traveled faster than any fleet or message system could carry. Traders, diplomats, and explorers spoke of it in hushed tones. Some species dismissed it as foolishness, a young species attempting to assert influence it could never hope to achieve. Others felt a strange respect, a cautious curiosity. How could humans act with such calm in a world where power was usually measured by fleets, weapons, or the ability to dominate? Meanwhile, humanity did not sit idle. Back on Earth, the delegation reviewed the events carefully. They understood the Council's systems, its politics, and the arrogance of its older members. They also knew that words alone were no longer enough to be heard in a chamber filled with those who laughed at them. The silence they had created was a statement, but it needed to be followed by action, subtle yet deliberate. Reports from Council observers soon began to show unusual activity. Fleets that were normally sent to patrol human borders or monitor trade routes suddenly reported anomalies. Sensors detected fortified positions, shielded installations, and new formations of ships that did not match any known design. The humans were preparing not for war but for deterrence. Their silence in the Council had been intentional, a way to make others underestimate them while giving humanity time to strengthen its position. Inside the Council, the atmosphere grew tense. The older species were used to control, to assuming dominance over younger civilizations. But something about humanity had unsettled them. It was not just their calm. It was not just their patience. It was the knowledge that humans could act decisively without needing validation or applause. That realization began to ripple through the chamber like an invisible wave. And delegates began to question their own assumptions. Trade negotiations that had previously gone smoothly started to face unexpected delays. Delegates who had dismissed Earth's concerns now found doors closing without explanation. Systems near human territory began to report reduced traffic and communication disruptions, though nothing appeared openly hostile. The galaxy was sensing a shift, though few understood its origin. Humanity's silence was already changing behavior. Even among species that had once mocked humans, there were signs of unease. Some sent fleets to reconnoiter, only to find empty patrol routes and quiet stations. Others attempted to push trade agreements through, but messages went unanswered. The humans were not hiding, but they were choosing carefully when and how to engage. Every move was deliberate, a reflection of strategy, discipline, and restraint. Within the Council, debates grew heated. Some argued that humans were unpredictable, dangerous even because their calm made them impossible to read. Others insisted they were still a minor species, limited by their technology and fleets. But doubt had already been planted. For the first time, delegates began to worry about the consequences of underestimating a species that could act quietly and effectively. Across the galaxy, smaller civilizations began to notice the changes as well. Systems that had relied on Earth for trade or security noticed gaps. Some species reached out cautiously, hoping to understand humanity's intentions. Others watched from a distance, curious about the growing influence of a species that had been dismissed just days earlier. Humanity's quiet preparation and careful restraint were creating a network of respect and fear, without a single battle being fought. Back on Earth, the human delegation continued their work. Scientists and engineers were improving defenses, expanding communication networks, and monitoring the galaxy for threats. Diplomatic channels were open, but only on terms carefully chosen. Every decision was measured, deliberate, and consistent with the principle that power did not need to be shown off. It needed only to exist in readiness. The silence of humanity became its own message. To the Council, to the galaxy, to every species observing from afar, it said, "Underestimate us at your own risk." The humans were not angry. They were not seeking revenge. They were not trying to dominate. They were simply preparing, quietly, calmly, and effectively, while allowing others to reveal their own weaknesses through arrogance, impatience, and mockery. Some Council delegates began to panic. How could a species act so decisively while remaining so calm? How could they project influence without speaking, without fleets clashing, without open conflict? It was a new kind of power, one the galaxy had rarely encountered. Even those who had once dismissed humans could no longer ignore the implications. Reports began arriving from border systems. Fleets approaching human space encountered unexpected resistance, automated defenses, shielded patrols, and observation posts that seemed to anticipate movement before it happened. Nothing was overtly hostile, But the presence of these installations made clear that humanity had prepared for the worst, while keeping the initiative under their control. Their silence had been the first step. Their actions now confirmed that the galaxy should take notice. Inside the council chamber, debates reached new levels of tension. Species that had previously mocked humans argued fiercely over how to respond. Some advocated for force, believing that an early strike would remind Earth of its place. Others counseled caution, suggesting that underestimating humans now could have catastrophic consequences. The very act of leaving the chamber in silence had created uncertainty that no council protocol could resolve. Even smaller species, often overlooked in the council, began to watch humanity closely. They saw a species that acted with discipline, patience, and focus, unshaken by ridicule or intimidation. Some quietly reached out to humanity, seeking alliances or partnerships. Others reconsidered old agreements, realizing that the balance of influence in the galaxy might be shifting. The human departure had not been a retreat. It had been a quiet assertion of control and foresight. The humans themselves did not act out of ego or pride. They did not celebrate their growing influence. They simply continued their work, preparing Earth and its allies for whatever might come. Their calm, measured actions were a reflection of strategy, not arrogance. Every choice, every move, every decision reinforced the principle that strength could be shown in ways beyond shouting, weapons, or intimidation. As weeks passed, the galaxy began to adjust. Trade routes shifted, patrols altered course, communications with Earth were no longer taken lightly. The Council, once dismissive, now studied every transmission carefully. The humans had demonstrated that influence did not require confrontation, and that sometimes the quietest actions carried the loudest consequences. For humanity, the lesson was simple: patience, discipline, and restraint were as powerful as any fleet or weapon. By walking out in silence, they had shifted the balance of perception. By preparing quietly, they had shifted the balance of power. And by acting deliberately, they were creating a galaxy in which respect would no longer be demanded. It would be earned. The Council could still laugh. Some still did, hoping the humans would eventually make mistakes or act rashly, but the seeds of doubt had been planted. Even the most arrogant delegates now questioned whether they had truly understood the species they had mocked. Humanity's quiet power had begun to ripple outward, touching every corner of the galaxy, leaving the Council and its members unsure of what would happen next. And for the humans, this was only the beginning. Their silence had spoken volumes, but it had also prepared the way for future actions. They had shown that respect could be earned through patience and intelligence, that influence could be gained without aggression, and that a species need not shout to be heard. The galaxy had noticed, and it would never be the same again. Months had passed since humanity had quietly walked out of the council chamber, yet their absence continued to make waves across the galaxy. The council had tried to maintain its usual routines, sessions, negotiations, and discussions, but the void left by the humans' departure weighed heavily on every decision. The silence of humanity had become more than a message. It had become a presence, an unseen force that made even the most confident delegates uneasy. For humans, life on Earth and in their fleet systems had shifted into a rhythm of preparation. Scientists worked tirelessly on technologies that could defend their planet and their fleets, but these were not weapons of aggression. They were tools of protection, designed to ensure that humanity would never be caught unprepared. Engineers, pilots, and strategists collaborated across disciplines, combining intelligence with discipline, ensuring that every decision was deliberate and precise. The galaxy, meanwhile, began to take notice in ways that no one could have predicted. Reports from border systems indicated that humans had fortified their defenses in ways that were subtle but effective. Observation stations, shielded fleets, and patrols were positioned strategically, not to intimidate but to ensure security. These installations were invisible to most, only detectable to those who knew what to look for, and even then, they required careful study to understand. Council members who had once mocked humans now whispered in uncertainty. They tried to predict human behavior, to anticipate the next move, but found it nearly impossible. Humans were not reacting to provocation or mockery. They were acting with patience, careful planning, and a calm determination that made even the most arrogant delegates reconsider their assumptions. Some began to wonder whether they had underestimated the species entirely. At the same time, smaller civilizations and independent traders observed these changes with growing curiosity. Humans were not seeking alliances aggressively, nor were they flaunting their growing capabilities. Yet their strategic silence, combined with subtle movements and careful actions, was earning respect. Systems that had once ignored Earth's warnings began to reach out cautiously, attempting diplomacy and dialogue on terms set by humanity. The young species had learned that the galaxy listened when they chose to speak, not when they were mocked or laughed at. In the council chamber, tension reached a new height. Delegates debated for hours, arguing over how to approach humanity. Some demanded immediate action, advocating for fleets to confront Earth and force the humans back into line. Others counseled caution, warning that any rash action might trigger consequences no one could control. The silence of humans, combined with the visible changes at their borders, had introduced a new element into council calculations: uncertainty. And uncertainty, in a body that thrived on control and certainty, was terrifying. The humans, however, did not act out of pride or a desire to dominate. Their actions were measured, their strategies deliberate. They had studied the galaxy's politics and had seen how older species relied on assumptions and arrogance to maintain control. By walking away silently, they had created a pause, a moment of reflection. Now they used that pause to strengthen themselves and their alliances. Every new system surveyed, every new installation built, every fleet maneuver calculated was part of a careful plan, to be ready, not to attack. As months turned into a year, the first tangible signs of humanity's quiet influence began to emerge. Fleets approaching Earth's territory found themselves being monitored by advanced sensor arrays that anticipated movement and reported anomalies before they could become threats. Automated defense systems, carefully designed and strategically placed, responded instantly to unauthorized activity, showing a level of preparation that startled even the most experienced observers. No engagement occurred, yet the presence of these systems sent a clear message: humanity was ready. The Council could no longer ignore it. Reports of human installations and fleet movements spread across diplomatic channels, sparking debates and strategic recalculations. Some delegates admitted privately that they had underestimated the humans. Others tried to downplay it, arguing that Earth's capabilities were limited, that the young species could not sustain long-term strategic planning. Yet, even as they argued, they could not deny the pattern. Humanity's quiet actions were reshaping perceptions of power and influence across the galaxy. At the same time, humanity's approach to diplomacy began to change subtly. They reached out to select systems and species not to dominate or threaten, but to build networks of understanding. These alliances were small at first, based on mutual respect and practical cooperation. But they were powerful because they were voluntary and thoughtful, not coerced or forced. The humans demonstrated that influence could be achieved without intimidation, that respect could be earned through strategy, honesty, and calm action. Even among species that had once mocked humans openly, there were signs of hesitation and unease. Delegates who had laughed, believing that a young species could not challenge the established order, now questioned whether they had misjudged Earth entirely. Some attempted to probe the humans through trade or diplomacy, only to find their messages unanswered or redirected according to human discretion. The silence that had once been a single dramatic act in the council chamber had grown into an ongoing, subtle strategy that influenced behavior throughout the galaxy. The effect of this strategy became particularly clear when one of the larger, more aggressive species attempted to test human resolve. They sent a fleet into a sector near human space, expecting little resistance and intending to assert dominance. Yet the fleet returned reports of unexpected surveillance, automated defenses, and coordinated human patrols that had anticipated movements in advance. There had been no combat, no attacks, yet the presence of these defenses forced a retreat. The galaxy began to understand that humanity's strength did not lie in confrontation, but in preparation, foresight, and the ability to control situations without firing a single weapon. Back on Earth, the human delegation observed these developments with quiet satisfaction. They knew that respect was not demanded. It was earned. They understood that true influence often came from calm restraint and careful planning. By showing that they could prepare, anticipate, and act without aggression, humanity had demonstrated that they could not be underestimated. Their silence had been the first step, and now their actions confirmed it. The council itself became increasingly divided. Some members wanted to confront Earth to assert authority through direct force, but hesitation grew. The humans had changed the rules without a word or a threat. Others advocated for diplomacy, realizing that negotiating with a species so measured and strategic might yield better results than attempting to intimidate them. The debates were longer, more serious, and more cautious than ever before. Humanity's quiet influence was reshaping not only perceptions, but also decisions at the highest levels. Meanwhile, humans continued to strengthen internal coordination. Their scientists and engineers worked tirelessly on advanced monitoring systems, communication networks, and defensive technologies. Pilots trained for long missions, learning to move fleets with precision and strategy. Diplomats refined their approach, carefully managing information and engagement to maximize effect. Everything was deliberate, disciplined, and focused on the principle that strength was not always loud, and influence did not require aggression. In the broader galaxy, smaller species began to take notice. They saw humans as a species that could protect itself, act wisely, and gain respect without domination. Many sought alliances, trade agreements, and partnerships. Humanity's approach, calm, measured, and strategic, offered security and predictability in a galaxy often ruled by unpredictability and arrogance. The reputation of humans began to spread not as conquerors, but as a species that demanded to be taken seriously through intelligence, preparation, and integrity. By the end of the year, it was clear that humanity had achieved something extraordinary. They had not fought battles or issued ultimatums. They had not sought dramatic recognition or immediate power, yet their influence was felt across the galaxy. The council was quieter when discussing human affairs. Their decisions weighed carefully. Smaller species respected Earth in ways that had once been impossible. And even those who had once mocked humans now approached interactions with caution and consideration. The quiet power of humanity had reshaped the galaxy in ways that no one had predicted. Through patience, preparation, and discipline, they had shown that influence could be gained without aggression, that strength could be asserted without dominance, and that respect could be earned without shouting. The Council and the galaxy at large had learned an important lesson. Underestimate humanity at your own risk. And for the humans themselves, this was only the beginning. Their silent strategy, their careful preparation, and their measured actions had created a foundation that would allow them to act decisively when the time came. They had proven that true power lies not in force but in foresight, patience, and the ability to remain calm under pressure. The galaxy had noticed, and it would never view humanity the same way again. The galaxy had never experienced silence like this before. Humanity's quiet preparation over the past year had unsettled everyone. Delegates in the council whispered constantly, trying to predict human behavior, yet nothing was certain. Humans had not shouted, had not threatened, and had not sought attention, but their influence was undeniable. Every system near Earth, every trade route, and every diplomatic channel had been subtly affected by their calm and deliberate actions. The time had come for the next step. On Earth, the human delegation gathered with a sense of quiet purpose. They had watched the galaxy respond to their restraint and strategy. They had seen fleets hesitate, trade negotiations slow, and alliances shift, all without a single shot being fired. Their patience had been rewarded with awareness, their preparation with respect, and now the humans were ready to make their presence fully known. Not in anger, but in clarity. A signal was sent across the council and to every major system in the galaxy. It was short, precise, and unmistakable. We will return. Observe us carefully. There were no threats, no ultimatums, no demand for attention. The message alone caused shockwaves. Delegates who had laughed and mocked now studied their consoles with unease. Some dismissed it at first, assuming humans were bluffing, but the quiet confidence behind the transmission made them pause. Within hours, human fleets emerged from hidden positions across multiple sectors. They did not attack, but they were impossible to ignore. Ships moved in perfect formation, their presence carefully calculated to demonstrate capability without aggression. Observation drones mapped every council sector with precision, recording and relaying information in real time. The humans had made sure that no one could underestimate them again. The council convened an emergency session. Delegates arrived quickly, their forms tense, their voices lower than usual. For the first time there was no laughter, no mockery. Even the most arrogant members hesitated, unsure of what the humans were planning. The empty seats of the human delegation now carried weight, a reminder of their earlier silence and the consequences of underestimating them. When the humans finally re-entered the chamber, they did so quietly, without fanfare. There were no dramatic speeches, no attempts to intimidate, no displays of overwhelming power. They walked calmly to their seats, each step deliberate, each gesture measured. The council had expected conflict, but the humans offered none. Their presence alone, steady and unshakable, was a message stronger than words. The human representative stood and spoke in a calm, steady voice. "We did not come here to mock, to argue, or to show force. We came to be heard, to be understood, and to demonstrate that our patience should not be mistaken for weakness. We walked away once to prove that mockery cannot sway us. We prepared while the galaxy doubted us. Now we are here to show that our silence is deliberate, our strategy is deliberate, and our purpose is deliberate." There was a heavy pause in the chamber. Delegates looked around at one another, realizing that the humans' calm, collected demeanor was more intimidating than any fleet or weapon could ever be. The laughter that had once filled the halls was gone. Mockery had vanished. Even the oldest and most experienced delegates understood, perhaps for the first time, that humans were not naive, impulsive, or emotional. They were resolute. Outside the council chamber, reports came in from border systems. Fleets that had tried to move near human space found themselves being observed, mapped, and deterred without confrontation. Automated defense systems, strategically placed installations, and coordinated patrols ensured that no fleet could approach without being noticed. The humans had created a galaxy where respect was earned not through threats, but through preparation, discipline, and foresight. The impact on the council was immediate. Delegates began to reconsider their previous assumptions. Discussions about human intentions became cautious, deliberate, and serious. No longer was humanity a source of amusement. They were a species to be respected, their actions studied, their strategies considered. Every decision regarding Earth was now weighed against the undeniable fact that the humans had mastered patience, restraint, and silent influence. Across the galaxy, smaller civilizations began to reach out to humanity. They saw a species that could protect itself, act with intelligence, and maintain calm in situations where others would panic or attack. Alliances were formed not because humans demanded loyalty, but because they inspired trust. Systems that had once ignored Earth's warnings began to coordinate trade and defense agreements with careful respect. Humanity had created influence without aggression, respect without demands, and presence without noise. The Council attempted to respond. Some species pushed for confrontation, hoping that a show of force would remind humans of their place. Fleets were moved, patrols increased, and weapon systems readied. But every attempt to test humanity's resolve ended in hesitation and uncertainty. Humans had planned every contingency, their fleets and installations anticipating every move without firing a single shot. The galaxy began to understand. Humanity's strength did not lie in violence, but in readiness, foresight, and calm determination. In the council chamber, the human representative continued to speak. "We have walked out to show that silence is not weakness. We have prepared to show that foresight is not fear, and we now stand to show that discipline, patience, and honesty carry a power that cannot be underestimated. We do not seek to dominate, but we will not allow disrespect or disregard to go unaddressed." There was a ripple through the delegates. Some bowed heads in acknowledgement. Others exchanged nervous glances. The room was no longer filled with confidence and arrogance. It was filled with consideration and, in many cases, fear. Humanity had taken a young species' natural restraint and turned it into a force that reshaped the balance of the galaxy. Outside the chamber, the humans' influence continued to grow. Systems that had observed Earth's restraint and preparation began to adjust their own policies. Fleets were repositioned, trade routes reconsidered, and alliances reevaluated. The humans had created a ripple effect without aggression, demonstrating that influence and respect could be achieved quietly, with patience and with discipline. For the first time, the Council began to see humans not as a young species to mock, but as a species whose approach was deliberate, effective, and inescapable. They had mastered a subtle art of power, one that required no explosions, no war, no threats, just preparation, focus, and calm resolve. The galaxy had been reminded that underestimating humanity came at a risk, and that risk was now apparent in every corner of the council. As the human delegation took their seats and looked across the chamber, there was no triumph in their eyes, no arrogance, no desire to humiliate. They had shown their power quietly, subtly, and completely. They had proven that patience and preparation could achieve far more than noise and spectacle. Their influence was now established, their presence undeniable, and their intentions clear. Humanity was not to be mocked, dismissed, or underestimated again. The galaxy had learned a lesson it would not forget. The council had learned it most of all. Mockery could not sway humans. Ridicule could not provoke them. Their silence, their patience, and their disciplined preparation had created a power that spoke louder than fleets, louder than weapons, and louder than the arrogance of older civilizations. And for humanity, the lesson was simple. Respect is earned through clarity, honesty, and preparedness. Strength is shown through discipline, patience, and calm resolve. Influence does not require aggression. It only requires the willingness to act with integrity and foresight. The humans had walked out in silence, prepared in secret, and returned not with war but with undeniable presence. The galaxy would never see them the same way again. With that, the human delegation finally sat, calm, steady, and composed. The council, now fully aware of the power that had been underestimated for so long, could only watch. Humanity had spoken without raising a voice. They had acted without aggression, and in doing so, they had reshaped the balance of the galaxy forever.